This episode is brought to you by Blueprint Health. Blueprint Health is a measurement-based care platform for mental health providers. You can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/blueprinthealth. And also this episode is brought to you by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com, the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers in private practice. They're who I use in my practice. Check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Hello, I'm Gordon Brewer, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, where we explore the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Well, hello everyone, I'm Gordon Brewer, and glad you're with me here on the Practice of Therapy podcast. And if this is the first time for you to tune in, glad you found us, glad you're listening in. And if you're coming back for more, glad you're back. And this is episode number 219. And I'm really looking forward to you hearing from my guest today. She is a good friend and also was a former supervisor of mine, Stacey Lanier, and Stacey is based in Nashville, Tennessee, and Stacey and I have kept up with each other. We worked together back, I hate to say how many years ago, but I've always had just so much respect for Stacey and have learned so much from her. And really, this topic that we tackle today, I think is going to be really interesting for you and really very, very timely as well, as we're coming out of the COVID pandemic, hopefully. It's just, you just never know with this stuff, but it seems like we finally turned the corner with that and that more and more people are vaccinated and all of that. But Stacey and I talk about, and it was kind of funny because when we were talking before we started recording and just in our email conversations, what is just this whole topic of, okay, what do you do when we as therapists are a hot mess? And I just thought that was just perfect for the things that we talk about. And we also talk about a little bit about how it's good, I think, to be able to do some self-disclosure in the therapy room and how that plays out. And so looking forward to you hearing my conversation with Stacey and getting to know her. But before we get to Stacey, one of the things that I want to remind everybody of is that I'm getting more and more resources up on the website, practiceoftherapy.com. And some resources in particular I'd like to call your attention to are the new free automated webinars I've got there. I've got 3 up right now. Going to have a 4th one out here soon. But they're on. One is on using Google Workspace in your practice, how that might be beneficial to you. Another one is on scaling without failing. And I teamed up with my good friend, Dr. David Hall, on that one. And then the third one is it's really called the Traversing Third-Party Payers and Managed Care. And it's really about whether or not you would want to take insurance in your practice, because I know that's been an interesting topic for people. And just heard yesterday on the news, particularly with President Biden's speech, the State of the Nation speech, that they're really putting a lot more emphasis on mental health care, and looks like there's going to be some bipartisan push through of legislation so that mental health care is treated just like medical care within insurance. So all of that, I think, is important to take into consideration, particularly for those of us in practice. I'm a insurance-based practice myself. And so learned a lot about accepting insurance along the way. But anyway, if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/webinars, you can find all 3 of those webinars there, and you can sign up for the time, register for the time that is convenient for you to watch it and to participate in the webinar. So they're automated webinars, so doing things a little differently in that way. And so you get to pick your time that's convenient for you. So I'd like to throw that out to you. And so check it out, practiceoftherapy.com/webinars. And also, before we get to Stacey, I'd love for you to hear from the sponsors of our podcast, and that is Blueprint Health. They are a measurement-based platform for mental health providers. It's a good way to see how good of a job you're doing. It's really backed up by evidence-based practices, and really was thrilled for them to be a sponsor, because I feel like what they're doing is just right on the mark as far as keeping our clinical skills saw sharpened, and also TherapyNotes. And so love for you to hear from them both. TherapyNotes is the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. So before we get to Stacey, I'd like for you to hear from our sponsors. You know, as your practice grows, the systems and processes you have in place will keep your practice running smoothly. That's why it's important to have an electronic health record system that is specific to mental health providers. TherapyNotes is a complete practice management system with everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with patients remotely, create rich documentation, and bill insurance, all right at your fingertips. Their streamlined software is accessible wherever and whenever you need it. They're who I use in my practice. And did I mention that they are one of the top-rated EHRs for mental health providers? Their support is also second to none. So be sure to check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And be sure to use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. That's therapynotes.com. And this episode is also brought to you by Blueprint Health. You know, one of the best ways to serve clients in your practice is through measurement-based outcomes. In fact, more and more third-party payers, aka insurance companies, are demanding measurable outcomes. And with more and more emphasis on good mental health, having a way to measure your outcomes just makes sense. Introducing Blueprint, the measurement-based care platform that administers, scores, and charts hundreds of symptom rating scales to give clinicians deeper insights into treatment progress. Ultimately, by helping behavioral health providers to grow top-line practice revenue, increase clinician satisfaction, and deliver more effective care. So be sure and check them out by going to practiceoftherapy.com/blueprint health. And by going to that URL, you can also get your first month free. Again, that's practiceoftherapy.com/blueprint health. Well, hello, folks, and welcome again to the podcast. And I am so thrilled. I just that word doesn't do it justice to have my dear friend Stacey Lanier back with me on the podcast. Stacey and I have we have known each other. I hate to say how many years it is, but
so many.
We worked. Stacey and I used to work together when we were both working for agencies, and we've kind of kept ourselves in touch throughout the years. And Stacey, welcome again. For folks that might not know you yet, tell them a little bit about you and how you landed where you've landed.
Yeah, of course. So again, I'm Stacey Lanier, and I am a group practice owner in Nashville, Tennessee, where we all specialize in trauma. All of our therapists do EMDR, and I also do brain spotting as well. There are 3 of us, and we're growing. And for my specialty is seeing other therapists. And let's see, the last time I was on the podcast, we talked about building other streams of income.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a co-owner in a co-working space for therapists. And then the pandemic happened. So all of
Right.
that really basically came to a screeching halt. But here I am still practicing and seeing other therapists and growing my group practice.
Yes, yes. And I know Stacey is a person that I have always I don't know, I've just felt close to her along the way, even though we don't see each
Mm,
other much. But we
yes.
just really I think when I was she was actually my supervisor when I was working
Mm-hmm.
for the agency, and I just had so much respect for her and
Uh,
just her abilities and just her brilliance and just how smart she is. And so, one of the
Gordon, you're
things
too
that,
kind.
yeah, yeah, it's the truth. It's the truth. I speak the truth. But,
Yes.
as we were chatting before we started recording, is that I know one of the kind of the missions that Stacey's been on here recently is really kind of pulling back the curtain on mental health, and particularly for those of us that are in the field of really being
Yes.
able to practice a little bit more self-disclosure with our clients and really allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. So, Stacey,
Mm-hmm.
tell folks just kind of how you've gotten your head around this so far.
Well, I kind of landed in this place after having, after having met with quite a few therapists, right? Had worked with quite a few therapists in session. And when you're working with other therapists, there's an understanding, right, about vulnerability. There are certain understandings, let's just say that, about the therapy process and vulnerabilities, and certain expectations that you will connect, right, with
Mm-hmm.
your clients, and also hold them in high regard as colleagues at the same time. And so, in those relationships and dynamics, I found that it was necessary to share a little bit more about myself in the therapy room in order to build that rapport, right, with my therapist clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I use the example of when I was working with one therapist and I shared a little bit about my marriage from, 20 years ago, and it was a hot mess. And she asked
Mm-hmm.
me, was I a therapist then? And I thought that was so funny because, there's kind of this misconception that we have it all together and our lives are perfect. And that is
Mm-hmm.
not the case. So I just
Right.
wanted to kind of pull back the layer of self-disclosure, kind of push those boundaries a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
understanding that we can't share, bare our souls with our clients, but there are certain things that we can share that help build rapport
Mm-hmm.
and enhance the therapeutic alliance. And then the other part is that we're a global world now. We're a global society and everyone's on social media. And
Mm-hmm.
if we're not sharing about ourselves, right, on social media, sharing our lives, sharing mental health tips, mental health information, can we really be trusted through our clients' eyes if we don't have a presence on social media?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And, that's something I've felt for some time is that I just, I think as Stacey, you and I have been doing this a good while. I mean,
A while.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. And so there's a part of the clinical world that is not necessarily stuff you learn in school, but you
Yes.
just learn through experience and through um, experimenting with techniques and just approaches and that kind of thing. And the one thing that I
Yeah.
think gives therapists more credibility is when you can do some self-disclosure and
Mm,
talk about your own struggles and
yes.
how you've kind of overcome that. And it doesn't mean that,
Absolutely.
like you shared, uh, troubles in relationships and troubles in, with kids and all of those
Yeah.
kinds of things. I think just gives us more credibility with folks.
Absolutely. I think it, speaks to our humanity and, the imperfections of being a human. And I never want to be seen as, the person who has all the answers. Now, I may have a certain mastery or expertise in certain areas, but I'm certainly not a master in being a human being, right? That we come with so many flaws. And I think that it's important for us to show that part of ourselves as well, with our clients and via social media. We're talking about person of the therapist type of stuff.
Yes.
And I think that it helps humanize us for the general public, right? So that they're more apt to reach out to a therapist when they know we're just humans, just like them.
Right. Yeah. Well, I know one thing that just a theme that I see, and I think most therapists that I'm talking to here lately, we're not having too much trouble having to fill up our practices
at all.
Yeah, it's just, and I think with COVID, and hopefully we're kind of hopefully getting out of the peaks of it all. Although I'm afraid it's going to be around for a while, but hopefully not as, not the lockdown stuff as much anymore. But
Sure.
I think it's given people permission to talk about anxiety, talk about the mental health struggles that they have, and those times when they feel sad or depressed or all of those things, or it's just struggles in their relationships. All of those things are now, there's not as much of a stigma around seeking out help and talking to therapists and counselors.
Sure. Absolutely. And yet there is still, that stigma still exists in certain communities. And although it's lessening, it's still there. And in the African American community, that stigma still exists. And I think that, the millennials and the Generation Zs, they're being called the therapy generation, which is amazing. It's wonderful. And yet there are still some of us, like I'm Generation X, I think you're Generation X, who are not seeking therapy as often as some of the younger generations. And so it's really important for us to continue, right, this fight to destigmatize it.
Yes. I think about when I tell clients just in the therapy room, some sort of anecdote or trying to talk about a metaphor. And when I drop the bomb of, when I was talking to my therapist, and it's just kind of like, you go to therapy too? Kind of thing. And and I think that's one thing I would encourage anybody that's listening to definitely have your own therapist. And you want to talk. And I know that's one of the things that you've really come to specialize in, Stacey, is working with other therapists. And do you mind sharing too, just kind of the process, the difficulty you found as a Black woman finding the right therapist for you?
Yeah, well, years ago, maybe 10 years, 15 years ago, when I really needed a therapist as I was going through that difficult marriage, I could not find a couples counselor who looked like my ex-husband and I. I could not find a Black woman in private practice. And so we did seek out counseling, but there were barriers to perspectives and understanding of the African American lived experience, which caused us to really kind of drop out of therapy. And that statistically there's so much research around, right, around that. And so I just, I became what I needed at a certain point in my life as a Black woman in private practice, serving other therapists, because that is exactly what I needed back then.
Right.
And it was virtually impossible to find in Nashville, Tennessee at that time.
Yeah, that's great. So curious, what sort of, as you work with other therapists in their own therapy, what sort of themes do you see come up for people and just the struggles that they have?
Yeah. Well, it's, they're common struggles like other clients, non-therapist clients. And I find that what's, really interesting is that, we think that most of us think we choose this profession. And really, I think the profession chooses us. So for so
Absolutely.
many
Yeah.
reasons. And so there are those of therapists, those of us who have experienced childhood trauma, who have experienced, really difficult relationships along the way. And so what I see in the therapists I work with is unresolved trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and, family of origin stuff that keeps coming up, and repeated patterns of, in their lives. And that's what we address. And I do EMDR and brain spotting, which they seem to love,
Mm-hmm.
as a modality. And so for me, it's kind of twofold, right? So it's clinical, and we're working together, and we're helping to resolve their trauma. And with EMDR and brain spotting, they're experiencing these modalities that some of them don't practice. And I'm
Yes.
hoping I'm hopeful that then it encourages them to kind of seek out and do their research around those modalities as well, so
Right.
that they can offer that type of healing to their clients too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I would encourage everyone that's in this space to find a good therapist to talk to for yourself. I think
Yes.
it's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. I know it's made a huge difference for me, as I've shared with on the podcast before. My wife is disabled, and we've just gone through a lot of health issues with her, and just her disabilities, and the fact that she's in a wheelchair now, and all of that kind of thing. You know,
Yes.
I couldn't cope with it if I didn't have someone to talk to
Mm.
about that. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
real grateful for my therapist, Howard. I'll quick shout out to Howard. And well, yeah. So I mean, that's the I think just essential in making us
Yes,
better clinicians too. I do. I think it just helps me
absolutely.
makes it better for me in the work that I do
Yeah.
with clients.
For sure, we have to do our own work. And sometimes we see our therapist, and we may take a break, right? And then things come up, and we go back to our therapist in the same way non therapist clients do as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find, I was thinking about what it was like to work in agency, and
Mm-hmm.
working in private practice. In agency, all of your therapist friends are right there. There you can stop at the water cooler, you can take
Mm-hmm.
breaks with them, you eat lunch with them, and typically, you're talking about work, and then your life, you kind of interject things that are happening in our lives as well during those times.
Mm-hmm.
But in private practice, it really is, kind of lonely,
Yes.
and you don't
Mm-hmm.
have as much opportunity for that kind of social engagement with other therapists,
Yes.
which can
Uh-huh.
kind of mitigate some of the when you're not seeing a therapist, in those downtimes, you
Mm-hmm.
have access to other therapists that can kind of mitigate, some of that gap. But in
Right.
practice, right, then it's really important to have a therapist, that you're seeing
Yeah.
regularly. So we're doing our own work. And like you said, we're all inundated with work. We
Mm-hmm.
haven't taken a break in 18 months, 19 months now.
Right.
We haven't
Right.
taken a break. We're holding space for people who are struggling, or on the struggle bus, as I like to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some of us are also on the struggle bus.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So, another reason to, as therapists, to have our own therapist.
Right. Right. Well, I've always felt that yeah, you're exactly right. In private practice, it can get really isolating and lonely,
Yes.
because you don't, unless you've got a group practice, but even at that, there's a little bit different dynamic for folks that are practice owners. You
Yes.
can, it's with your employees or your staff, it's a little bit different dynamic. It's not that you can't
Yes.
share things with them, but I think it's always good to have trusted colleagues that you can interact with, and you can share things, and that sort of thing. Excuse me.
Yes. Sure.
We'll cut that out.
Okay.
No, but one of the relationships I have is with my good friend David Hall, who's in Knoxville, Tennessee. And we talk regularly just about our practices,
Yes.
and we share, he's a trusted colleague. We share our numbers. We talk about, struggles, when we've had struggles with employees or struggles with different things around running the business. I think you need to have both of those kinds of people, your person that you do your clinical kind of self-growth work with, but also having a trusted mentor and colleagues that you can work through the business side of things with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because they don't teach us about business at graduate school.
No, not at all.
And the learning curve is steep and it's long. And, you have to have a support system in business as a practice owner.
Right.
And I encourage everyone as practice owners to find a mentor for sure.
Sure.
I have a mastermind group through a company called Brain Trust that actually forms masterminds for female entrepreneurs. And the 5 other women in my vault are not practice owners. They own various types of businesses, but it's such a great, rich, deep learning environment to be connected with them. And I couldn't have made it this far without them.
Yeah. And I've got something similar. It's three other therapists that we got together, and quick shout out to Uriah and Jessica and Whitney. And we get together usually every other week just to talk about, all 3 of us have other side hustles where we're doing stuff like the practice of therapy and that kind of thing. And so I love that I think you absolutely have to have that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those people that you can bounce ideas off. So Stacey, tell folks a little bit about some of the other things you're working on besides your group practice.
Sure. Well, I have a blog now, and it is called Stacey Mayre, STACEY MAYRE. That's also my social media handle across all social medias at Stacey Mayre. And the blog is basically a conversation with other therapists. Again, I see therapists as clients, and they're also colleagues, right? So I just want to have a conversation about what being a therapist has been like for us, what it's like, some of the challenges. I posted the other day about, some therapist thoughts in session, and a couple of them were like, "Oh, that's a cute shirt," or "Oh, I'd be friends with her if we weren't clients." So, we're just humans and we're sitting there. Sometimes our minds, kind of wander off.
Yeah.
And, just having those types of conversations, with other therapists to kind of bring a little bit of light and laughter as well, because our jobs are so serious. We talk so much about trauma and problems and issues, and how can we talk about healing as well and wellness. And so that's what the blog is about. I'm working on a journal. I will put it out there, maybe just so we hold you accountable.
Yes.
I'm working on a journal that is directed toward other therapists as well, for those therapists who can't do therapy with me, but that this journal will serve as in the place of actual face-to-face therapy with me.
Awesome. And I'm sure folks will be hearing more about that as Stacey puts it out there, because I told her I had to help her kind of promote it and put it out there when it comes out.
Yeah. So, and I so appreciate that.
Yes.
I'm going to need your help.
Yes. I'm glad to do it. So, well, Stacey, I want to be respectful of your time and that sort of thing. But what sort of maybe closing thoughts do you have just around this whole topic of? We decided that I decided the title of this episode even before I recorded it, which is very unusual. I think that's the first time I've done that when therapists are a hot mess. So.
Hot mess. Closing words might be, just encourage. It's okay if your life is a hot mess as a therapist. There are times when it will be a hot mess. You may be going through grief and loss or, divorce like I did,
Mm-hmm.
or as you're raising your kids, parenting is one of the most difficult
Mm-hmm.
jobs ever, also rewarding, but not absent of, strife sometimes. And so being okay, I want us as
Mm-hmm.
therapists to be okay with our lives being a hot mess.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's all useful for us as we grow and progress and as we help our clients that, and it's okay to share some of that, right, with our clients as well,
Mm-hmm.
in a measured way. And so just knowing that if your life is a hot mess, it's okay. And to
Yes.
find a therapist who who can help you through it.
Yes. And what I've discovered so far is that life can be a series of hot messes. And
Yes.
it's going to come up, but we can all be resilient and we can persevere and we can heal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can heal.
Yes.
Absolutely. And we will
Yeah.
heal.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And
Yeah.
there's always joy on the other side of the hot mess, I think.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
well,
I love that.
Stacey, I'm so glad you joined me again. And folks, you'll be hearing more from Stacey Lanier. You need to check her out. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you, Stacey.
Lanier at truthendempowered.com, or again across all social medias at Stacey Mayrie.
Well, I'm so glad you got to hear from Stacey, and I really consider it a privilege to have people like her in my life, and she has just really helped me along the way and really given me a lot of insight to a lot of things over the years, and I wish we were closer together so we could get together more often. But anyway, be sure and check out Stacey's website, truthempowered.com, and there'll be links here in the show notes and the show summary. And I'm sure she would be a great person for you to connect with if you're really kind of struggling yourself or on the struggle bus, as she likes to say. And I'm really looking forward to you. I can't wait till she has her journal out, because I think that's going to be a great resource for us as therapists, and really thinking about our own self-care and our own support is so important. And if you don't have a therapist yourself, I really want to push you and encourage you to get a therapist for yourself, somebody that you can confide in and talk about all the things that we have to carry, because in our day in and day out, listening to people's stories and listening to what people hand us in the therapy room can be heavy at times, and it can really affect us in different ways. So I think it's good to have a way to process that. I mean, after all, we are therapists. We should be in therapy ourselves, right? So anyway, again, check out Stacey's stuff, truthempowered.com. And there will be links in the show notes and the show summary. And also be sure and go over to practiceoftherapy.com/webinars and check out those free webinars we've got there. You get to pick the time to watch them and learn from them, and hope to be putting out more and more resources like that for people, just as a way to help you in your practice and really kind of give you the knowledge you need to move forward in your practice and to really scale and grow and be of support. So be sure and check those out. And as always, big thanks to our sponsors, Blueprint Health. You can find out more about them at practiceoftherapy.com/Blueprint Health. And if you'll use that link, you can try them out for 1 month for free. And then also TherapyNotes, and you can find out more about them at practiceoftherapy.com/TherapyNotes. And be sure and use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, to try them out for 2 months for free. So be sure and check it out. And looking forward to you being with me in future episodes. I've got a lot of great people lined up for interviews. And if you're ever interested in being on the podcast, you can go to practiceoftherapy.com/podcast, and you'll see a link there to apply to be on the podcast. And if you feel like you would like to tell your story about being in private practice and share with others what you've learned along the way, I'd love to have you. So be sure and check that out. And wherever you might be listening to the podcast, I'd love for you to follow us or subscribe wherever you might be listening and leave us a rating and leave us a review. That only helps us to reach more people when you do that. So take care, folks, and we'll join you next week on the Practice of Therapy podcast. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.